I'm Michele Cobb, publisher of AudioFile magazine, the #1 source for audiobook reviews in the world. Today, we are joined by two talents, author Christy Mandin and narrator Elizabeth Knowelden. And we're going to be talking about Christy's recent audiobook, MILLIE FLEUR Saves the Night. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michele.
All right, a little bio for each of you. So, Christy is the author of several books that incorporate her love of nature into their cozy whimsy, including Lucky and the Storyteller's Rule, as well as Millie Fleur's Poison Garden, which was an Audie finalist in the Young Listener category and received an AudioFile Earphones Award. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we know and love Elizabeth. We've had the pleasure of speaking with her previously on the podcast when her narration of The Ornithologist's Field Guide to Love was a romance pick on AudioFile's Best of 2024 list. And she's earned earphones for Death Around the Bend, and of course, for the title we will discuss today. So let's get to it. Christy, please give us a little synopsis of this picture book, which is interesting when you talk about moving into the audiobook world.
Yeah, so this is the second book in the Millie Fleur universe. So the first one was Millie Fleur's Poison Garden, which you mentioned already. And if in book one, the residents of Garden Glen were afraid of anything that is different, calling it poison, then in book two, Millie Fleur Saves the Night, they're most definitely afraid of the dark, calling it dangerous. So Millie Fleur has to set out on a mission to bring the dark back to Garden Glen, encourage the residents there that the dark is not scary. The dark actually is pretty amazing if you're only brave enough to turn out your lights and see what wonders are waiting in the dark.
So I have to ask, was there anyone or anything in particular that inspired this world? Because several of us at AudioFile were talking about how it seems very Tim Burton-esque. Was this intentional?
Yes. So I am a diehard Tim Burton fan, Charles Addams, Edward Gorey. And actually, when I first set out to design Garden Glen in the Millie Fleur universe, I immediately thought of the neighborhood in Edward Scissorhands, where all the houses are pastel, They all look the same. But then I also thought about like Stepford Wives and just how unsettling things that are all the same can be. So I was kind of hoping to, in the opening spread, when you're first introduced to Garden Glen, to have this kind of uncanny feeling of things being so symmetrical and the same, so that it kind of sets up that being different is actually much more interesting. So yeah, definitely inspired by Tim Burton, but also a lot of other wonderfully weird creatives.
Oh yes, and I love Edward Scissorhands, so I'm glad I wasn't too far off in
Yep.
in feeling some of that. All right, Elizabeth, what about any inspirations you had for the performance? Anything fun to share as you put this together?
Well, as an actor, I was also inspired by Tim Burton, and his voice has been a through line throughout my loves since I was very, very young. And what I love especially about Edward Scissorhands, to bring it up again, but it has this beautiful coupling of light and dark. It has somebody who, from the outside, could be labeled difficult or weird, where actually they're not dangerous, they're vulnerable, they're lost, they're loving. So that empathy and that connection to the beauty of that was with me since I was young. So when Millie crossed my path and I opened up the script, I felt like I'd already sort of walked within the pages. It felt like the project was already, it felt like we were already kindred spirits, we just hadn't met yet. And the fact that I was thankfully chosen to do this wonderful, incredible creation by Christy was just it's a complete joy. And also because Christy has such a strong voice in what she's doing, but also she's creating such beautiful and clever artwork. That's two forms of expression that are then played from one person that's placed into the same project. So her voice is very clear, the tone is very clear, But I think when you have a project like this, if you lean into magic like I do, generally look for magic in my everyday life, that influence of Edward Scissorhands, the influence of magic, the influence of having that kind of kindred spirit connection of empathy and celebrating people who might seem different to others on the outside, meant that I sort of jumped in. I felt like I'd already lived within the pages.
That's such a beautiful framing of differences. I really love that. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Christy, now this is a picture book, right? So, I'm curious, what's it like hearing your book as opposed to seeing it on the page? And could you have imagined this type of transformation when you originally wrote the title?
Yeah, so it's it's interesting, this question, because I I'm a visual artist, but I also have aphantasia. So that means I don't have a mind's eye. It's blind, where visual imagery is concerned, which is strange, but I also know I'm not unique in that way. But I know Glenn Keane, a Disney animator who created The Little Mermaid, he also has a blind mind's eye. But my visual mind's eye is very clear. When I hear something, I can replay it like very vividly. Like I can Elizabeth, this may be weird for you, but I can hear your voice vividly in my head without ever, like I listened to it once, and that has since become, that is my soundtrack now for the entire Millie Fleur universe. So could I imagine it that way? No, not really. What I imagined was, and this is also kind of strange. We found out that the voice in my head, while I am born and raised in Georgia, I'm as Southern as they come. Every now and then that Southern accent comes out. The voice in my head is clearly very British. When we were discussing they brought me in at the beginning, and asked me, like, what are the vibes you're looking for, kind of, like if they're, and a lot of times that discussion involves like someone you already know, in pop culture or whatever, so if there's like a familiar, very popular voice or vibes, like Tim Burton-esque vibes. And Helena Bonham Carter is often associated with Tim Burton. They were married at once, I believe. And so that was the voice kind of in my head. And then when Elizabeth's recording came through, when we were, they'd sent me a few different versions, someone who was, American accent, British accent. And I was like, that is her. Like, Elizabeth was it from the beginning. So could I imagine it? Sort of, yes. Like, in a way, Elizabeth was already kind of the voice in my head. So when I first heard the recording, I was absolutely like, I welled up. I thought, this is so magical, because it's not just Elizabeth. There's like a original score, and Elizabeth does like voices for like some kind of background stuff, and it's a whole production. And I think it actually gave me a clearer picture for the rest of the books to come of the world that I was now a part of. Even though I created it, Elizabeth put it in Technicolor, so to speak.
Now, Elizabeth, did you actually look at the picture books when you were preparing to record?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just coming off of the back of that lovely, those lovely words. I've just got to catch my breath for a second. That's really moving. Yes, 100%. I devoured the picture book, and I always say to anyone who's interested in Millie Fleur, please listen to it while you hold the book in your hands,
Yes.
so that you can see the artwork, because it's so rich. There's so much in it. And so what we would do is we would, and I say we, I'm talking about myself and our wonderful director, Paul at Scholastic. We would record it 2 pages at a time. So as if we had opened up the picture book in the middle. And we would record first the scripted lines, so the actual text that Christy had written. And we would do that a couple of times. And then we would pause and we would say, right, what's on the page? What else is here that we can bring to life? And so, for example, there would be a sign saying, get out. And we would do it in the voice of someone who might live in the village. Or there might be, a plant on the page. And Christy touched on this. And in the first book, there were so many so many wonderful and hilarious plants that Christy created. And we improvised the voices for all of them. And a bunch of people think that it's sound effects, but it's not. It's my madness that's coming through. So Paul and I would be there. I recorded it at home, but would be, sort of in the booth. And we say, right, what does this plant sound like? And I would just sort of come out with these, like all these kind of crazy sounds. It's like, I don't know why. To me, this plant just sounds like this. And then we would spend 10 minutes improvising all of the other different, all of the artwork on those 2 pages. And then we would turn over the page and we would start on the next one. So everything that you see in the artwork, we are trying to bring to life. So it's not simply just the beautiful text that Christy has written. And also, the artwork is very telling. Like the text can say one thing, but the look on Millie's face can confirm exactly how adamant she's feeling in that moment, or how vulnerable she's feeling while maybe she's pretending to seem strong. So those two do very, very much go hand in hand. And one of the joys of this second book, Millie Fleur Saves the Night, is that we now have woodland creatures that we can bring to life. One of my great joys of this was playing a raccoon who was reciting and telling a story, which is just in the artwork. But he really stood out to me, and I said, oh, we have to get this raccoon. He's hilarious. Something that I would say was challenging about character voices for this specific book was finding the voice of the dark. Because how do you do justice to what Christy has created? You're also playing darkness itself, right? Which has connotations of, and the story of the book is that, people are wary of the dark. It's not a safe environment. It's dangerous. But if you look at the pictures, if you look at the artwork, what Christy has done in the way that she has created the image of the dark is it's a very rounded figure. It's enormous. It's like a giant in comparison to the size of Millie, but the shoulders are rounded, the paws are rounded. It's just these little eyes that are peeking out. So if you were just looking at the text, it could seem very ominous. But to look in the artwork, it reminded me of a really oversized dog that needed to be helped from the shelter. That was sort of the immediate feeling. But then trying to connect a voice to that, I was like, well, there has to be a softness, there has to be a vulnerability, but we have to have a sense of power, because this is darkness. This is the dark that does have sway over so many people. So we played around with it and ultimately came out with something that we're really, really happy with. But that was definitely a fine line that I was trying to walk in, honoring what Christy had created and also honoring what my spirit was telling me about that character's vulnerability, but also their power.
That's so interesting. That's the first time that I've heard your thought process on that, because we don't really, like, you make it and I get to just enjoy it. And, they
Chat afterwards.
they asked my opinion on it, and I'm like, I love it. I cried. 5 stars, 2 enthusiastic thumbs up. But I don't really get to hear how you arrived at those decisions. I just get to kind of enjoy them, and I love it, because that's exactly what you described as exactly my thought process in creating the character. So I'm so glad that we are the same kind of wonderfully weird.
This time is the first time that you've actually met face to face, but did you have some email interactions or?
Are we copied on the same emails?
No, we didn't have so much email communication. We would speak via our director, Paul at
Yes.
Scholastic,
Yeah.
with any sort of creative inspirations that Christy, really wanted to make sure of. But generally, we were sort of separate for the process of the creation of both of the projects, the different stages of the project. But then we have connected through social media afterwards, and sent messages of adoration to one another
Right.
because Christy's just absolutely brilliant, and celebrated in how well people have been receiving the first book and their joy, and quite rightly the accolades that Christy has been receiving from such a wonderful project.
Which is not uncommon to the picture book world, where I am the author and the illustrator of this book, but when there's an author and a separate illustrator, they often don't talk either. And that
Yes.
connection, you talk to your editor and your editor talks to them. And so, yeah, and I think it works out great that way, because Elizabeth had creative freedom to make those decisions, and it makes it a better product that way, I think. So, and I love it.
Well, and you got to experience a little bit of what it's like to be Elizabeth, because you actually recorded the back matter
Yeah.
of the title. Anything surprising or maybe even scary about recording this?
So, okay, did I love it? Well, let's see. It was cool. Like, it felt cool, to be in the booth. I thought, oh, this must be what Elizabeth feels like. And then I very quickly realized, oh, I don't like this at all. This is only because I am keenly aware that reading a picture book aloud requires performance art.
Yes.
That's a whole other creative skill that, just because I created the book, doesn't necessarily mean that I have that skill set. And I've since talked to other authors of picture books who, I don't know if this is widely shared, but there are a set of us who don't really like reading our book aloud. It's not because we don't love our book or that we don't enjoy the reaction that we get from the crowd. All of that is wonderful to be able to interact with your audience, but it's that we are keenly aware that it requires a level of skill, and that there might be people in the room who are better suited to that. So I think at one point in the very, very early days of talking about the audiobook, before we had, discussed a narrator, any of that, they had asked me, kind of just in a quick email exchange, well, do you want to read it? And I was, absolutely not. No, absolutely not. Number one, I had told them we'd already had the discussion about the voice in my head is very British, but I can't do a British accent, so that'll be a disaster. And also, I just know that there's somebody way better at this. Like, we need a professional, not me. So when, after Elizabeth had worked her magic, and then they were like, well, usually the author reads at least the author's note, I even still was like, you want me to follow that? Like, Elizabeth? And I even said, like, are we sure she can't read it? And they were like, no, authors usually read their own author's note. And I was like, well, yeah, all right, that makes sense. So yeah, it is a fine art of performance that I am happy to let other people take the lead on.
Now, this is the second book in this series, and you've talked about the amazing work that Elizabeth has done. As you created the second book, were you influenced by the audio? Were what did you have new inspiration for this title?
Yeah, so going into the second book, now there was Millie has a voice, and Garden Glen, the residents there, have a voice, and so that, like I said, it brought it into Technicolor, and that made, I mean, because there's going to be 7 Millie Fleur books when it's
Oh,
all said
wow.
and done, so that kind of helped set the tone of, it gave me direction, for where this was going. And but it didn't make the whole process of making book 2 totally easier, because in book 1, the first book was created without a series potential. It was just picture books are generally created as a one and done kind of thing. And if it turns into a series, that's cherry on the top, but you almost never start out thinking in terms of a series with picture books. And so, book one, I inadvertently created a lot of problems for myself when I had to recreate the world, because in book one, when you open the spread and you see the first spread of Garden Glen, there is nary a lamppost. And I had to, in book two, light up the night because they're scared of the dark. So I had to figure out creatively how to fix that. So book two has a lantern keeper, but yeah. So
Ah.
Elizabeth couldn't help me out with that, but that was a problem of my own making.
And in writing a second book, does revisiting that same character, does that help you? Or it sounds like it was a bit of a surprise that you were going to do 7.
Yes, actually, I'm still some days like, what is happening? I was not ready. Millie Fleur was like being shot out of a cannon, so in the best way. But yeah, I think you don't have to really do character design. You've got your main character. You've kind of, and in a picture book, you don't have a lot of secondary characters usually. So I have my main character. I know what her vibes are. I've established kind of, what her personality is like, so I know what problems she's going to face and how she would normally solve them, what snafus she might get into. So, yeah, I mean, I think I'm squarely in a Millie Fleur like mindset, at least until 2029. And I kind of like it, like my agent asked, like, do you want to discuss like other titles right now outside of the Millie Fleur world? Are you going to get bored? And I don't think so, because she's like my most favorite thing I've ever made. So yeah, I'm happy to live in this universe for as long as they'll let me.
Well, the fans are definitely happy to hear that. So thank you. Now, Elizabeth, what about you? Revisiting a character for the second time, what does that feel like? And anything in particular that has stuck with you from reading this series?
Well, what I would say, firstly, I'm over here silently cheering that there's going to be 7 books, which is really exciting. Hooray! What's lovely is, that Millie is so beloved. The
Yes.
first book really has touched so many people, and accolades aside, which are rightly deserved for Christy. The most wonderful thing is that children and adults are sitting together, and some listening and connecting and laughing along with Millie and learning through fun. And the message of the first book, which is, well, my interpretation, I wouldn't speak for Christy, but my connection to it is that you don't have to be like everybody else. What is unique about you is beautiful and to be celebrated and actually to be highlighted, and let's shine a light on it. And so the thought that that book is out there and doing such beautiful work already means that when we come into book 2, I mean, what a launching pad, right? So we know that that's already firmly established. As an actor, but also just as a human being, as soon as I got the script, I was sort of, licking my lips, very, very excited about what she was going to get up to next, and following along and discovering what was going to happen. Because Millie is so clear in my mind, and I mentioned before that I felt like this is a kindred spirit project that the stars aligned and I was thankfully brought in on. It really very much felt like no time had passed from the first book to the second book. Millie was very, very clear, very firm in my mind, as was her mother, and the whole of Garden Glen. But what's interesting about the second book is, there are a lot of new characters, whether they are, like we touched on, a lot of woodland creatures. There are new people in the town. We have the man with his long beard selling his lanterns. There's lots and lots of different funny characters that pop in for a line here or a line there. So it's so rich in whole new ways. So I have the warm kind of fuzzy feeling of getting to live in this world again, and really just to connect to the truth of what Christie's created the message that Christy, that we are trying to put out into the world through Millie, in a non-invasive, joyful, but intelligent way, where the audience will ask questions in a safe environment and grow from it. And as an actor, I just have to sit down, kind of be excited, and just really listen and tune into what Christy's created and tell the truth of this new story and this new adventure that Millie goes on.
We so appreciate you both taking the time to talk to us about this adorable and charming audiobook. And it's been such a delight to watch your mutual admiration for each other and to be able to bring you together to have some of that. Thank you to Scholastic for helping us create this episode. And we encourage everyone to visit AudioFile's website for reviews and sound clips from thousands of audiobooks, including Millie Fleur Saves the Night by Christy Mandin, narrated by Elizabeth Knowelden. And as always, take a moment to rate and review this podcast so you can help others to find us. Thank you both, ladies, and thanks to everyone for listening.